Welcome to Dallas Dirt. I'm your host, April Towery, City Hall reporter for CandysDirt.com. My guests today are Ashley Brundage and Bryan Tony. Thank you for being here, and tell us who you are and what you're doing.
Sure. Thanks for having us. I'm Ashley Brundage, CEO of Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity and board chair for the Dallas Housing Coalition.
My name is Bryan Tony, organizer of the Dallas Housing Coalition and a public policy consultant through my firm BGT Strategies.
What is the Dallas Housing Coalition?
We're a membership-based nonprofit whose mission is to advocate for the creation and preservation of attainable housing in the city of Dallas for all.
You came about a year and a half ago.
We've launched in June 2023 at a press conference at Golden Gate Baptist Church and the Golden Seeds Foundation in the Bottoms neighborhood around a $200 million campaign for bond funding for affordable housing and homelessness solutions.
Why launch this housing coalition?
In my experience living and working in Dallas for the last 8 years, there were a lot of momentum around the comprehensive housing policy adoption in 2017. A lot of work being done by Mike Kropowski, Opportunity Dallas, and then a lot of that fell apart when Mike moved out of town and back to DC. He's still doing amazing work at the federal level, working at the Real Estate Council, the Chamber, and other nonprofits around Dallas affected by housing affordability. There wasn't any coordination between those groups. We started with a blank one-pager, no logo on it, simple text, like we need to start communicating, we need to start advocating with a unified. The Housing Coalition came from that.
Ashley, you came on in its infancy as the board chair. Maybe it wasn't called the board chair at that time.
Yeah, it was good timing in the community to form the coalition. There was a lot happening coming out of COVID, more people paying attention to the housing crisis we were facing. Even knowing we were in a crisis before COVID, there was just more eyes on it because of the rocketing prices. We started planning in the fall of 2022, it was. My timing's getting messed up. And the city had started talking about that they were planning on the next bond opportunity. I was working with the city as well on their new comprehensive housing policy, 2033. So there was a lot of community meetings happening around that where not only were community members and nonprofits asking for some sort of coalition, some sort of unifying voice around housing, the city was asking for that. City staff and elected officials, as part of this planning process for the housing policy framework, wanted to see a coalition come together that would hold the city accountable to the work they were doing and the numbers and the plans through that policy. More and more, I was out in the community talking about this work. Bryan was talking about the coalition funded through Dallas Habitat. We ended up on the same side of a lot of arguments, kind of tag teaming like what we do now, right?
Yeah.
Talking about the different issues. He asked if I would be one of the lead voices for the coalition. Once we decided to form into a formal nonprofit, asked if I would be the board chair.
Y'all have gotten a lot of momentum. A lot of people know who you are, want to be part of it. You're at just about every council meeting, city plan commission meeting, zoning ordinance committee meeting. You're there and you are the go-to folks. You mentioned, let's talk about the bond first, how you formed for the 2024 bond, advocating for $200 million for housing. All the bond propositions passed in May.
Yep.
Do you consider that a success? You still need more? What are your thoughts on how the bond shook out?
It was a huge success. When we first convened the coalition, we asked what are the two most important issues they're facing. Number one was public funding and support, meaning communication, public awareness about affordable housing and political will. Number two was zoning reform. We knew we had the bond as our first big rock that we could push on together. Dallas had never funded attainable housing through a bond program before, where other cities in Texas like Austin and San Antonio had already taken those steps. We have a huge housing shortage in Dallas. If it's a priority to be an inclusive and affordable city, we need to put public dollars behind it. Propositions G, H, and I were all approved with over 70% of voter approval, which showed that voters also agree that housing should be a priority.
Why you talked about zoning reform and an overhaul of the development code occurring right now. One of the criticisms around the bond was that there weren't specific measures those dollars could go toward. Talk about why it's important to have infrastructure in place before a developer or builder wants to construct housing.
Yeah, definitely separated the housing conversation from what Dallas has traditionally funded, like parks, libraries, cultural facilities, public safety, new police academy. Those were all able to point to where the dollars go. But we face that obstacle because the development process takes longer. It takes years for a developer to acquire land, get the approvals from the city of Dallas, architect, design, engineering. And in a lot of places, like you're mentioning, there's no infrastructure currently. There might not be streets, sidewalks that a private developer could then go and build housing on. And so that was what Proposition H focused on for single family homeownership development at the time. And they've since said year one, they're prioritizing more rental units for lower than 50% area median income. We'll continue to monitor the equitable distribution of those bond funds over the next 5 years. We didn't get enough funding in the ultimate allocation. We'll be back advocating for more funding in the next bond program.
Okay. When will the next bond program be?
It'll be up to city staff, usually 5 to 7 years. Other cities have done standalone housing bonds. So if Dallas wanted to and had the bonding capacity to do a standalone bond, perhaps in partnership with another public entity like DART or Dallas College, they could do that and say this is just a one-time allocation.
And this question is for both of you. Why do you care? I assume each of you live in homes and afford them. So why does this matter to you in terms of creating housing that's available to everyone?
I think for me, when we talk about having homes that everybody can afford in our community, it's one of the biggest social justice and racial equity issues of our time. Everything we do depends on having a stable, safe, a place we can afford to live, right? We need that home. We need that roof over our head. We need to know where we can bathe and sleep. Without that, you can't be successful in your job. You can't succeed in school if you have no place to study. Everything that we do in life depends on the stability that we experience in our home. That even includes our health care and saving money. If we are spending too much on our home, then we're not able to save for emergencies, or we're not able to save to send our. So just the basics and the foundations of life, I think, depend on that stable place to live. I think we as a country have done a lot of harm to African Americans in particular, but all people of color through redlining. And all of that comes back to homes and where we decided people could live in the past. We have a lot of work to rectify that. We need homes people can afford, different price points, options across the entire city, community, and region, but we need to preserve affordability in different sectors of town. Homes fall into disrepair because seniors can't afford upkeep. We need to face what we've done and help make the future better for all of us.
For me and many others, housing is personal. I grew up with a lot of privilege, a two-parent, stable, middle-class household in Northeast Tarrant County. Hurst, Euless, Bedford, if anyone knows that area. I was able to walk safely to and from a public junior high, to and from my high school, LD Bell, enroll in an international baccalaureate program, which set me up with success with great teachers and curriculum to go to TCU on an academic scholarship, study political science, economics, learn about supply and demand, get my first job in education policy at the Dallas Regional Chamber while living in an apartment in Uptown with 2 roommates along the Katy Trail and a short commute to work. Working in education, you see what affects students and families, like housing, transportation, the quality of their neighborhoods. I went up to the Real Estate Council and began working for TREC, gained knowledge about city planning and the city of Dallas's processes, and acquired my first home, a townhome, in the Bryan Place neighborhood in 2019. I was able to do that because I didn't have student debt and lived with 2 housemates to help pay for my mortgage. I still have a housemate now, 5 years later, found on Facebook Marketplace. This is the reality of many people's experiences in my generation. In other cities, housing is a hugely important issue. You can't have that opportunity if you don't have stable housing. It's so important for Dallas to embrace that and think beyond ourselves as a community, what type of city we want to be.
I just learned you don't drive a car. How has that opened your eyes to how difficult it is to get around the city?
I went car-free in September of 2023, made that conscious decision. that I would no longer own a car. I live in Bryan Place, a mile north of downtown. There's a Target down the road. There's Exall Park, which is a beautiful park. I can be in Fair Park on Washington Avenue, go north to Greenville, to Deep Ellum, downtown and uptown. And that kind of 15-minute neighborhood and walkability is something urbanists talk about. It's an enjoyable lifestyle. I've learned to navigate DART, the buses, the trains, take rideshare or catch a ride with friends. It's been a much happier, less anxious experience for me.
Is it less expensive than having to maintain a vehicle?
I believe it's less expensive, both financially and mentally.
You said something that brought up a question. How does providing housing for all intersect with homelessness? I watched a meeting.
Dallas Area Partnership.
Why is it important to move forward the agendas of Housing First, Housing Forward? Is Housing First and Housing Forward the same thing?
Housing Forward is an organization. Housing First is a policy.
To push that ahead because we know it's working.
So for those of y'all that don't know, the Dallas Area Partnership to End and Prevent Homelessness is a partnership between the city of Dallas and Dallas County. The few of us that sit around the table there that represent various systems of either the city or the county to focus on ending homelessness. It's duplicative of what Housing Forward has with the Continuum of Care, the All Neighbors Coalition Board of Directors, put into place in 2017. It came after the 2016 City of Dallas Homelessness Commission. It was one of the recommendations. We've been sitting around the table since 2017, not doing anything, just talking, lots of meetings. Recently in the mayor's HOPE task force, the recommendation was for the DAP to be eliminated, to no longer function anymore. And now Councilmember Mendelson has released a memo recommending the same. Why is this important around affordable housing and homelessness? Homelessness is a housing issue. We would not have homelessness if everybody could afford a place to live. Housing First is a policy to move people from where they are experiencing homelessness, whether that's in a shelter or on the street. We need to move them from that place into housing and then wrap them around with all of the supports that they need to stabilize and succeed in the future, and eventually not have to rely on a subsidy capable. Some people are chronically disabled and they're going to be on a voucher or something forever, but most people who experience homelessness can self-resolve once they've been put into a place and supported for a minute to get back into a job or to help relieve whatever bills they might have had pile up because they weren't able to save for the emergency they experienced. Housing Forward has been decommissioning encampments, especially the largest within Dallas. They have street outreach workers who are going out every single day and meeting with the folks in the encampments they're working with and talking to them about getting them into housing, helping them find a unit. They have either a voucher or a rental subsidy to cover the rent for that person to move into an apartment. They have a landlord engagement strategy, identifying units where landlords are willing to take people with vouchers, exiting homelessness. And they also have risk mitigation processes in place so they can help incentivize those landlords to house our people that are exiting homelessness. And we're seeing it work. In less than 100 days, we housed over 100 people. We closed down 3 of the major encampments on the board of Housing Forward and on the board of the All Neighbors Coalition. We're seeing success is being demonstrated in itself. Housing people from the streets into an apartment is being successful. We're rehousing people. The biggest problem we're experiencing as a community is more people falling into homelessness faster than we can rehouse everybody because we don't have the affordability factor here. Like, we just don't have enough home options that people can afford to move into, and that's hurting us. We are seeing some groups advocating to move people from encampments into a sanctioned encampment or build another emergency shelter because they think it's inhumane for anybody to sleep on the streets, which, yes, nobody should experience that ever. However, spending millions of dollars to create another stop point for people who are in homelessness versus millions of dollars to build affordable housing, you are not solving the problem. You're just creating another delay in the process.
So where are the most visible camps?
So the 3 camps that we recently closed down, the most visible encampments were right around downtown Dallas, in the middle of downtown Dallas, where most people are driving into work and seeing those encampments on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Now that we've closed those down, do you
City
remember their
Hall,
locations?
Library,
The
around
library had
there.
already been shut down.
Yeah.
We're starting to expand our radius and look for the next visible ones. We don't talk about which ones we're targeting publicly while we're doing it because we don't want to cause more attention focused on the people who, we don't need to exploit their situation. We are trying to build relationships, build trust, and show them we mean what we say. We are putting you into a home because our people who are the most chronic, who have been on the streets for the longest, have been disappointed. They've been made promises that then people haven't kept. So we're having to go in and say, no, this time we mean business and have the money to do it.
Do you encounter a lot of people who are unhoused that would be happy to stay that way?
No. The myth of being service resistant is exactly that, the myth. The thing that people prefer is independence. So people prefer to sleep on the streets versus going into a shelter because most shelters have so many rules on what they can and can't do, what they can and can't bring, and when they have to be there and when they have to go to bed. And we are adults. We are adults. They just happen to not have a home and don't want to go by somebody else's rules. I get that. So they're going to sleep in a tent on the street until they can figure out what's next for them. You will have some folks who have severe mental disabilities, extremely hard to move into a home, to convince them to move into a home. But it's not because they are preferring to be on the streets. It's a literal disability.
Studies show a high correlation between cities with a higher cost of living and rates of homelessness. So that's where we're heading if we're not serious about affordable housing.
Yep. Direct
Well,
correlation.
you guys are data driven with your coalition. If you're watching this, you can see there are reams of paper. Let's crunch numbers. What are the stats on the housing that we need in Dallas?
I'd go to three sources that have been great recently. There's no shortage of data. Number one is Child Poverty Action Lab. They've done 2 rental housing needs assessments in the last 2 years. This year's numbers showed we're short 39,900 units for families making less than 50% area median income. For a family of 4, that's $48,700. Many single parent households are making around that, can't afford or aren't able to find housing where they're not spending more than 30% of their income on housing, which makes it really difficult to put food on the table, provide health care, and afford transportation to a job that may not be in your neighborhood. So that's why we have to create more housing, especially at that 50% and below area median income level. We do have enough housing for folks who might be making more than that, but the pressure on the low end means there's a lot of overcrowding, substandard housing, and we don't have enough supply of housing for people of all income levels, of all stages of life, that lead to rental prices, housing costs, home ownership opportunities being more expensive because there's still a lot of people making more than the area median income or getting their degree from college and starting a family. Then there's also BC Workshop. They've done a State of Dallas 5-year comparison report that found that we're short 16,000 affordable single-family homes. For people who can afford a home, there's 16,000 units of housing that we're missing for the home ownership side. We've lost a lot of housing built between 1940 and 1990, 38,642 fewer homes compared to 2016 for families making between $25,000 and $35,000 a year. And then third is Builders of Hope Anti-Displacement Toolkit. Looked at numbers from 2012 to this year and projected to 2032 based on current trends. In 2012, a typical home for a family earning $42,000 per year could afford 44% of homes sold that year. Now they can only afford, with adjusted inflation to $64,000 per year, can only afford 12% of homes. In 2032, that's projected to be 2%. So we're going down for our typical families making 42, 64, whatever they're projected to make in 2032, 80,000, but only can afford 2% of homes for ownership.
Well, And can we add to that income level that we're talking about is really important, because when you look at the DFW region, the majority of the people are making about $40,000 a year. The majority of our population are service workers and counter workers, or they're working in warehouses. They are the people helping our cities run. Right? And if they can't afford to buy or rent their home in this city, then our region is going to start to lose people. We're already seeing people move out. It's not just about our first responders and teachers anymore. This is impacting everybody at all levels. And we have got to start building more affordable home options, whether to purchase or rent. It doesn't have to be an apartment or single family home. Not everybody wants to buy a single family home and maintain a yard, but they could purchase a condo if they existed, or a townhome or a duplex. We have to create different options, opportunities, and price points. Just like if you were going to a mall to buy some clothes, we need to be able to go and buy the house that we want and that we can afford.
How do we get there? There's been scrutiny from the developer, Maggie Parker, who is bringing 200 townhomes to Southeast Oak Cliff. There's always a line of people concerned about traffic. And these are for sale homes. Everyone was excited that they're for sale. But you're going to have opposition to more housing near neighborhoods. That makes it difficult for developers. The city only has so much capacity through their housing programs. The most recent report said that they can do maybe half of what's needed in a 10-year period.
Right.
We need partnerships. However, partners are finding it difficult to build in Dallas. What's the answer?
We're trying to make it easier. What we can do is preserve our existing housing stock better, which is part of the recommendations of the Builders of Hope anti-displacement toolkit, as well as things like rental legal protections for tenants, property tax relief funds, home repair programs, so people can afford to stay and have the right to stay in their communities. On the building side, we need to make it easier to do business with the city. If they're going to have some sort of subsidy to build affordable housing, it needs to be financial or regulatory. Those are the two levers that the city of Dallas can pull on. We talked about the financial with the bond, public finance corporations and housing finance corporations that have tax abatements for developers in exchange for affordable housing. And then there's regulatory, things like density bonus programs, where we'll allow you to build less parking, to build a higher height. In return, you set aside 5 to 20% of your units or homes being built to families making lower than the median income. So that's a way that we can, without any cost to the city, build more housing of higher end and get some affordability built into those developments. We're looking at parking code reforms right now. There's opportunities for more building code reforms that would make it easier to build smaller apartment complexes up to 4 units, attached townhomes, legalizing missing middle housing instead of just large homes on large single family lots or luxury multifamily. We have that missing middle of townhomes, duplexes, walk-up apartments, many things, attached and detached accessory dwelling units that were built pre-1940, but we've had such restrictive zoning requirements put in place since then that we haven't been able to afford or build as much housing anymore.
What is next for you guys in 2025? If people were not able to go to your Dallas Housing Summit recently, where they can find that video and those meeting notes.
Sure. Right now, we're uploading all our summit slides. On November 21st, we attracted over 280 attendees to our housing summit at the Bill J. Priest Center, hosted by Dallas College. We had presentations on anti-displacement, financing strategies for mixed income development, how do you make the case for housing, including some research with Dallas residents on how to build more support for housing, tenant protections, and housing solutions. Those slides, the keynote panel video, recap video are all available on DallasHousingCoalition.com. As far as what's coming up, we have a state legislature that's convening on January 14th. We are already in contact and starting to work with our state legislators to make them aware of how housing affordability needs to be addressed at every level, local, state, federal, building code, parking, and legalizing missing middle housing reforms. We're going to continue to host events quarterly that are open to the public, either free or nominal cost for people to attend. We're looking at doing different community talks. We did that during the bond. We'd like to bring that back next year so we can have more residents and grassroots neighborhood associations engaged with our coalition. Now 270 members. Free to join, sign up for our emails, but might also be introducing a nominal membership cost and making that accessible to people of all income levels and company sizes, and then announcing a full-time staff person. So we'll see, hopefully in the next month or two.
You got any final thoughts, Ashley? Well, thank you for joining us. This has been Dallas Dirt. We will see you next time.